Hello, innovators. I'm Todd and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software. You're invited to join our MEP and construction innovation adventure with a mission to propel this great industry forward. My guest today is Aarni Heiskanen. He is a senior management consultant and business software developer who helps technology trailblazers succeed. He's a published author, blogger, and host of the AEC Business podcast, which I had the honor to be a guest on a couple months back. Welcome to the show, Aarni.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. It's great to be a guest once in a while.
That's right. It's a different experience, I know. So how'd you get into the construction industry to begin with?
Well, I'm an architect, so originally I was not sure that I would become an architect. I was interested in technology in general, specifically electronics at the time. We didn't have computers when I started studying, so it was more like electronics. But architecture has always been, let's say, interesting, and construction in general. I have family background in construction, like many others who are in the industry.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen to AEC over the years?
Well, when I started, we didn't have anything digital, any computers and things like that. So that was the biggest change that started in the 1980s, mid 1980s, and it has been going on. And now, what is maybe the biggest change recently is that we are actually seeing digitalization on the construction site. So it's maybe has been the last bastion, so to speak, not to be fully digitalized, but I'm seeing that change right now. And also one thing that is really interesting is the interest of investors in construction technology, as we've seen that the interest in investing in construction tech startups has skyrocketed.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much money coming into the contact startup space. It's pretty crazy. What do you think are some maybe misconceptions of the construction industry currently?
You mean in the industry or from looking from the outside?
Both.
Okay, yeah. Maybe something that we see often, and every presentation start with the notion that the industry hasn't been evolving at all, or it's really backward in terms of technology. But I don't see that. I think that there's a tremendous amount of technology already. And for example, one engineering company was on one of our panels recently, and they said that they had 700 pieces of software in the company, different. Wow. So it means that definitely there is a lot of digitalization going on. So that may be one of the things, and also that typically construction in the news is seen as when something fails, and I think that's because maybe we are not so great in communicating outside what we're doing and how we're doing, and that's one of the problems that I would love to see more positive communication coming from the industry.
Yeah, I agree. That's a soapbox issue for me. I think we touched on that when I was on your show, but I think it's a big problem, that this misconception of the industry, and there's several reasons for it, but I think one of the threads is in the industry, we do a bad job of talking to those outside the industry and saying what's actually going on, and we leave the narrative to somebody else that doesn't know what's happening in construction to say what's happening in construction.
That's right. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do every day, trying to communicate and encourage people to communicate.
Yeah. Any suggestions on how to do that better for people?
Well, just start talking. It seems that everybody's so busy working that they seldom have time to do anything except just some typical press releases or something like run-of-the-mill communication, but be more open perhaps, and come forward. I would say that be brave to tell your story.
Yeah, I love it. Keep it simple, start talking.
Yeah, yeah.
So you've had some recent hands-on experience with Spot the Robot. So I want to kind of dive into robotics in construction. Can you speak to what that experience was like and kind of what's the potential you see moving forward?
Yeah, that's Spot is really, really, like I would say, a sexy thing to have on the construction site. As an anecdote, I can tell you that I have seen Spot in action twice on a construction site, and I took some video from those encounters, and actually went to TikTok, on which I have never been previously, and posted one clip of Spot on the construction site. And on the first day, I got over 500 views on that video.
Wow.
Never having been on TikTok previously. So it's definitely something that interests people. Robots are interesting. And it was really fascinating to see how a robot can move around on a site, not colliding, not colliding on anything, and actually dodging people and so on. So it was very interesting to see how, and I was really convinced that this is something that we will see in the future on construction sites more and more often.
Yeah. What's the real potential of bringing in robotics from your vantage point?
Well, I see that, well, there are three specific areas where I see robots. Of course, we already have robots in factories on manufacturing in manufacturing environments. They have been there since the 1960s in auto industry, and more often in construction industry. So I see that that's one area where they are naturally, like in any other. But more often I expect to see them on construction sites and doing either data collection, data gathering, or doing actual physical work on the site. So Spot is an example of a robot that's collecting data. It's scanning 3D, doing 3D scanning, 360-degree videos, and so on. So it's providing information about the phase of the construction, what's happening, and also creating digital twins of the site. So that's one thing. And also, of course, drones, we can consider them as well as robots. They also used for data gathering. So that's one really big area for robots. And the other one, of course, is when they actually doing some work, and they can do installation. We have seen masonry robots, insulation, spraying robots, painting, plastering, drilling, rebar tying, earth moving, welding. Those are those kind of things already. And of course, 3D printing is actually robotics. And it's a really growing area. Sure. On the other hand, we have robots that can do some supporting functions. They can clean up the site. They can do layout automation. In other words, mark from the BIM model, do some markings on the site, and they can elevate things. They can help in logistics, and so on. So there are many use cases already, but of course, most of the things that are happening on the sites are related to drones, I would say. But I would say that in 5 years, it's very typical to see a robot roaming around the site.
Yeah, as you were talking, it made me think of this kind of theme has popped up in a lot of my recent conversations of how do you kind of bridge the divide between the digital world that is existing in construction and the physical world that obviously has to exist in construction as well too. You have to physically build the building, and those two worlds kind of struggle talking and passing data back and forth just because of the inherent, it's two different worlds. And so I think robotics can help kind of bridge that divide between physical and digital.
Definitely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. And the way that's happening right now already is that we have a BIM model, and we have a 3D scan of the site. We can compare either by a human or by an artificial intelligence application, compare those two things and see if there are any deviations, and also see how the work is proceeding on the site. So yeah, that's definitely, and AI naturally is a huge part of robotics in the future, and it's developing very fast. And it's one of the other things I think that will change the industry tremendously, that artificial intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that in 5 years, robotics will be pretty prevalent on a construction site. Do you think that that's kind of reaching the critical mass that even the smaller contractors and firms will be leveraging robotics too, or will it still be the bigger firms?
Well, naturally it's a question of cost and value.
Right.
So if you have, but I would say that, okay, nowadays a robot, if it's doing anything useful, it will cost tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I'm sure that as with any technology, the prices will go down, and we already have at homes, we have robots. So it's in our homes we have robots that do things. So I'm sure that once the demand is there, the supply will also follow, and the prices will go down. But I think that it's a question of the use cases, so to speak. So what are the most important use cases, and whether even a smaller company can find value in robotics? And there are certainly some areas where that can happen, but I would imagine that mainly it will be on the larger sites. In let's say in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, even on smaller sites.
Yeah, interesting. So you mentioned that having all the robotics and the technology in our personal lives that will bleed over into construction, that mindset. Do you think that as the younger generations start coming in more in force into construction, that mindset of, well, I can do this in my personal life, why can't I bring technology into the job site? You think that becomes more prevalent and more dominant to make the adoption of robotics and different tech more prevalent?
Yeah, and it has already happened whenever anybody comes to a site and they expect a certain level of digitalization, for example. And I have interviewed people on construction sites, engineers, for example, who are of the younger generation, and they are using BIM, for example, on the site, doing measurements, and they are recording things with their. If the company doesn't provide any tools, they will use their own mobile phones for that. So they are finding a way to digitalize anyway. So I think the companies should follow what they're doing and actually ask for their opinions about how to do things better.
Yeah, I agree. How does robotics help to bridge the gap in the labor shortage that exists in the industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that labor shortage, first of all, is partly due to poor management of this whole thing. So I would say that without any robots or even without any digitalization, we could double our productivity. So we could build twice as much as we do now, just by planning better, by doing using some of the, let's say, lean construction techniques and methods,
Yeah.
and managing better. So because we have so much waste, process waste, wasted time, waiting, and so on. So that's the first step. I would say that first think about how to make things less wastefully, and then robots will help in two ways. I think one is that we will see more and more prefabrication, offsite construction taking place. So their robots will be naturally used, and they will, in some cases, replace people, and we can automate that production on a production line. But on the construction side, I would say that they will be more like assistants to workers. So we are talking about cobots, collaborative robots who are working in collaboration with people, and that's a huge thing. We have to find out how we can make robots work together with people safely, and that's a thing that needs to be solved. But in that sense, robots will give workers superpowers in a way. They can do more in less time, and they become more like they become collaborators with robots, and that therefore their productivity will increase, and that has an impact on the need of labor. I don't see that there's nobody has to fear about losing their jobs because of robots. I would see that it leads to more productivity, increased productivity.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. And also, once we have these data collecting robots in place, they will also help us manage the process better, and logistics and everything else. So that will again improve productivity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. To me, robotics isn't threatening to the workforce. It's complementary, because it's augmenting the ability and the power. It's making I like giving the superpowers. It's making everybody like little Iron Man walking around.
That's right.
On a construction site. So it's pretty cool, the possibilities that it provides.
Yeah, and we have already seen those exoskeletons, which are kind of Iron Man suits in a way. So they give more strength to people, and they help them avoid strenuous positions and so on. And that's one way of thinking about robotics, very physically attached to your body, augmenting your body and so on. So that's definitely something that's also going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a construction innovation agent, how do you encourage others to embrace an innovative and growth mindset?
Well, the problem with construction companies in general is that their profit margins aren't not so great overall, and that leaves very little space for let's say innovation and thinking outside the box, so to speak. But I think that when you start to think about the transition that is going on in the industry, you have to think about it strategically. What does it mean to our company that we are digitalizing? And that's, I think it starts with the top management or the owners of the company. So they have to figure out, first of all, what does innovation mean to us? What is it? Are we going to do radical innovations or gradual organic innovations? Are we going to follow on other steps, or what are we going to do? So I think it's a strategic question first of all, and then you have to involve everybody in renewal, in a way, thinking differently. Even those field workers and everybody on the side, you have to open gates to ideas, And once you have done that, you can start identifying the processes or the waste in the processes. So I think that everybody sees that this is not working really smartly. I'm wasting my time, and then you start asking why is this happening? And when you get to the root cause, you can start innovating that based on that root cause. So it's both from the strategic point of view and both from the actual operation, very operational, very hands-on point of view, what you're how to start innovating. And if I've talked to several, let's say, engineering firms who are doing this, they have actually an innovation process. They have, it's like any business process. So it's a process inside the company, and it has certain rules, certain roles, and so on. So that's, of course, when you are taking it seriously, you start thinking about innovation processes. You're thinking about project portfolio management, for example, which is a very dear topic to me, and that way you, in a way, bake in innovation in your company and in your processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to be very intentional of making that decision and that mindset, that because there are operating on such small margins. But I think that the advantage of adopting the innovative and growth mindset is it allows for that growth or that profit margin to expand over time, because you're kind of fundamentally changing how your structure is and your model is.
Yeah, I was saying that one thing that many, which is one, in a way, a real issue is risk management, and how to manage risk. If you start doing something in a new way, how do you manage risk of that?
Yeah.
You don't want to fail on any project. You want to, of course, because there is already so much risk involved in construction. Why take more risk in? So and that is, maybe I've seen companies do small scale experiments and scaling up from there, and maybe that's rather a cautious way of approaching innovation. Is sometimes makes sense, but sometimes you also have to do something a little bit more radical, and not think about it as something that's coming from the management alone. So you have to, as I said, involve people in the process and let them innovate and come up with ideas. Then they also more easily buy in on the new things, and that's crucial, because construction, after all, is very much people-centric business, even though we have technology.
Yeah. I was in a course a couple of weeks back, and they were talking about that we need to shift to the mindset of, is it safe to try, instead of like, will this fail, or is it safe to try? And ask yourself that it might not be exactly how you as the manager or the one making the calls would do it, but is it okay to try? Do you have the kind of the boundaries and this kind of set up a laboratory for trying different things and experimenting? And you're going to be surprised with what works out of that experiments and what doesn't. And the stuff that doesn't work, you still are kind of fact finding and learning information while you take the time to kind of debrief and figure out what didn't work and improve on the next project.
Mm. And if talking about robotics again, I would say that those companies, startups, and other companies who are developing robotics for the construction industry, they also have to think about, let's say, think about the industry and the realities of a construction site, and make things as easy as possible and as safe and let's say fail safe. Because I've seen in practice how if something doesn't work, people very quickly lose interest. They don't want to have any extra confusion and any extra delays because of some technology. So make sure that your technology actually works, and don't try to do everything on the first time. So concentrate on the most critical things and make them work first, and then go on there, build up more on based on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point on the tech side. Advice to them: you get one bite at the apple in construction to prove that it works. If you're lucky, maybe you get a very timid second bite, but it better work the first time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. One thing that I didn't mention previously was that we are also seeing large construction machinery being robotized. So we will see more earth-moving things and things like that, which are quite intimidating to think about, that you have a large, huge machine doing some work on the side, and even that is happening right now. So who knows what we'll see in the future.
I just saw when you say it's cool and also kind of distressing. I saw a customer story where they have the robotic all the earth moving equipment that you could possibly think of, and they set it up so that it moves everything overnight, and so they come back and they're ready to start operating because all the holes were dug and everything over the night. They just let the let the equipment do their stuff while nobody's there. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's the same goes with Spot. Now I think that the most let's say the least let's say the easiest way to use Spot is that you leave it on the site, and when you leave the site during the night, the Spot will do its work overnight, and then in the morning it's done, so it doesn't disturb any workers there. Or so I think that automation actually extends our work days, so construction becomes 24/7 kind of work.
It's true. So if you could innovate one aspect of the industry, what would you pick?
That's what I think is the core thing is that we would make waste visible in the process. How to make, because the whole lean construction idea comes from the Toyota factories, and one of the things that they do is make everything very visible. So visible management, how to do that? Is it like traditional paper-based things, or is it something virtual, augmented reality perhaps? So that I think that communicating what's happening, creating the situational awareness of the site for everybody involved. So that's one thing which makes waste visible, which helps manage the site effectively, efficiently and effectively, and that's something that I hope to see more and more.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like it. So how do people find out more information on what you're doing and connect with you?
Well, I have a blog at aec-business.com, so you can find my information there and all the content that we are creating. And also I'm on LinkedIn as well, so I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Final question for you. What does innovation mean to you?
Innovation means it's about thinking differently. That's probably what innovation means, because I have always thought that we have, because the technology is advancing so fast, it's accelerating exponentially. So it forces us to think differently. So that's perhaps the thing that I would say about innovation.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably more a mindset than anything else.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Aarni, thanks so much for joining the show. I enjoyed the conversation.
Well, it has been a pleasure, and always nice to exchange ideas with people who also are doing a great job in communicating and communication.
I appreciate it. We have fun doing it.